I need to sign the papers first. That's the part nobody ever tells you about. The moment when your hand is steady and your voice doesn't shake and you realize that you've been preparing for this your whole life without knowing it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning because none of this makes sense without the beginning. My sister's name is Paige. She's 4 years younger than me, which means she was 11 when I started working my first job at a grocery store after school. I was 15. I handed every paycheck to my mother. Not most of it, all of it. Mom would take the envelope, count it out on the kitchen table, and say something like, "Good, we need this for Paige's dance recital, or Paige's new winter coat, or Paige's class trip to Washington, D.C. I wore the same pair of sneakers for 2 years because they still technically fit. I want to be clear, I didn't resent Paige for that. Not then. She was a kid. She didn't ask for any of it. The person making decisions was my mother, and my mother had decided very early on that Paige was the one worth investing in. Paige was pretty in a way that made strangers comment on it in grocery store checkout lines. Paige was charming. Paige cried easily and got comforted easily and moved through the world with the unquestioned confidence of someone who has never once been told that her needs are secondary. I was the other one, the responsible one, the one who figured things out, the one who, by 16, had taught herself to do the family taxes because my dad had left and my mom got anxious around numbers. By the time I was 22, I had a degree in accounting, a job at a mid-sized firm in Atlanta, and a habit of solving problems before anyone asked me to. By 25, I had been promoted twice. By 28, I was managing 3 junior staff members and had enough in savings to make a down payment on a condo. Paige, at 24, had changed her major 4 times, dropped out once, gone back, and was currently finishing a degree in communications at a school 2 states away, a school I was co-signing the tuition loans for. Because her credit wasn't established, and my mother had called me crying and said, "She just needs this one thing, and you're the only one who can give it to her." I signed. Of course I signed. That's what I did. The business deal came together in March. I'd been working on it for almost a year. A contract with a mid-sized manufacturing company that wanted to outsource their entire financial compliance operation. If I landed it, it would be the largest account my division had ever managed. My boss, a measured woman named Patricia, who didn't give compliments easily, had pulled me aside in February and said, "If this closes, we're talking about a director title. You understand what I'm saying to you?" I understood. The signing was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. The client, 2 partners named Howard and Bill, both in their late 50s, both old-school handshake guys who wanted to meet the people they were trusting their finances to, wanted a dinner afterward. A celebration. Patricia suggested we do it at a restaurant near the office, somewhere I was comfortable, so I'd booked a private dining room at a place called Alderman's. Nice, but not pretentious. Good wine list. The kind of place where conversations could happen without being overheard. I told my family about the dinner 3 weeks in advance. I told my mother, who told Paige, who texted me a string of celebration emojis and said she was so proud of me. I told them it was a professional dinner, not a party. I said this clearly. I said it's clients and my boss. It's not a social event, it's work. My mother said, "Of course, sweetheart. We'll celebrate separately." What I did not know, what I found out approximately 40 minutes into what should have been the best professional evening of my life, was that Paige had driven 4 hours from her school and was sitting at the bar. I didn't see her when we arrived. We were escorted to the private room, ordered drinks, and I was in the middle of explaining the transition timeline to Howard when I heard her voice in the hallway. Loud. That specific loud that Paige only gets when she's had 2 or 3 drinks and decided that the most important thing happening anywhere in the world is whatever she's currently feeling. She pushed open the door. She was dressed up, which made it worse somehow. Like she'd planned it. Like she'd gotten ready in a hotel bathroom somewhere and told herself this was a good idea. "There she is," she said, spreading her arms. "My big sister. The big important accountant." The way she said accountant, I can still hear it. Like it was the punchline to a joke only she knew. I stood up. I smiled. I said, very quietly, "Paige, this is a work dinner. I'll call you when I'm done." She looked around the table. At Howard and his wire-rimmed glasses. At Bill, who had gone very still. At Bill, who had gone very still. At Patricia, who was holding her wine glass and not drinking from it. She never invites family, Paige said, to no one in particular. Did you know that? She got a whole promotion. She hadn't been told about the director title, so I don't know where she got that, and she didn't even call our mom. Our mom found out from someone at her office. That was not true. I had called my mother. We had talked for 20 minutes. Paige. My voice was still steady. Please, you know what the problem is. She pulled out a chair and sat down at my table, at my work dinner, with my clients. The problem is that she thinks she's better than us now. She always has. Ever since she moved to Atlanta, she acts like we don't exist. Howard cleared his throat. Bill looked at his plate. Patricia said, gently but with a firmness that I recognized from quarterly reviews, I think perhaps. I'm her sister, Paige said, looking at Patricia with an expression I can only describe as triumphant. I'm allowed to be here. What happened next is the part I've replayed more times than I can count. Not because it was the worst thing. It wasn't really. But because of how quiet I went. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I stood up, touched Patricia's arm briefly, excused myself to Howard and Bill, and I walked my sister out into the hallway with one hand on her elbow, firmly. The way you guide someone who doesn't realize they're being guided. I walked her all the way to the lobby, past the hostess stand, and out the front door onto the sidewalk. What are you doing? She said. Go back to your hotel, I said. We'll talk tomorrow. I drove 4 hours, I know you did. Go back to your hotel. I'll call you tomorrow. She started crying then, which is what Paige does when she realizes a situation isn't going the way she planned. Real tears. She's never been a fake crier. She was genuinely upset, and some old part of me, the part that had been trained since age 15 to make Paige's upset feelings go away, almost reached for her. Instead, I went back inside. I'll tell you this about Patricia. She handled it with more grace than it deserved. By the time I returned to the table, she had redirected the conversation to the contract timeline, and when I sat down, she gave me one brief look that contained approximately 17 years of professional experience and said nothing at all. Howard shook my hand at the end of the night. Bill said, You got a good head on your shoulders. The contract was signed. The director title was confirmed the following Tuesday. My mother called me that night before I even got home. Paige had called her from the parking lot. I could hear in my mother's voice that she'd already decided what had happened. That version of events had been fully assembled before she dialed my number. She just wanted to celebrate with you, my mother said. She drove all that way. It was a client dinner, Mom. You could have made room for her at the table. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long moment. There were signed contracts on that table. She's your sister, and there it was. The sentence that had functioned as a master key my entire life. The thing that unlocked every obligation and overrode every boundary and made my needs smaller whenever hers were present. She's your sister. As if that were a complete argument. As if that answered anything. I'll call you tomorrow, I said, and hung up. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in my condo. My condo, the one I had saved for and purchased without any help, the one with the window that faces east, so I wake up with morning light. And I thought about something I hadn't let myself think in a long time. I thought about the co-signed loan. Paige's tuition loan was in both our names. That had been the arrangement for 2 years. I had been making the payments on time because Paige's student income was technically enough to cover them, but practically never materialized. The loan was for $41,000. My credit score was attached to it. I also thought about the lease. 8 months earlier, Paige had needed an apartment near her school. She hadn't built up enough rental history to qualify on her own. My mother had called, and I had co-signed the lease. 12 months, renewable. The renewal was coming up in 6 weeks. I had given these things without conditions because that's how it was done in our family. You gave because you were the one who could give. You gave without requiring gratitude or acknowledgement, or even the basic courtesy of not showing up drunk to your professional dinner and telling your clients you thought you were better than everyone. I lay there and I thought, I have been paying for her whole adult life, and she has never once said thank you. Not once that I can remember where it felt like she meant it. I want to be fair to Paige. I've spent a lot of time trying to be fair to Paige. She had the same absent father I had. She grew up in the same house. The difference is that my mother decided to handle her grief by pouring everything she had into Paige. Her attention, her resources, her protection, and Paige grew up believing that was simply how the world worked. That when she needed something, someone would provide it. That her unhappiness was a problem other people were responsible for solving. It wasn't her fault, she was taught that. But she was 24 years old. At some point, you encounter enough reality to know better. The night she showed up at my dinner, she was 24 years old, and she had driven 4 hours to insert herself into my professional life because she felt left out. And my mother had called me, not to apologize, but to explain. I decided something in the parking garage. It took me 3 weeks to act on it, but the decision was made right there. I called a financial advisor I trusted named Robert. I'd worked with him before on personal accounts. I explained the situation, not emotionally, the way I was feeling it, but practically. I said, here are the obligations I've taken on. Here is why I need to restructure them. What are my options? He walked me through everything. The lease cosign. I could submit a written request to be removed from the lease at renewal, citing financial review. The landlord would need to approve, but since Paige had been a reliable tenant, I'll give her that. It was likely. The tuition loan, more complicated. Removing a cosigner typically requires the primary borrower to refinance in their name alone, which means qualifying independently, which meant Paige would need to find a different cosigner or a different lender. You understand, Robert said carefully, that this will affect your relationship with your sister. My relationship with my sister is already something I've been paying for, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Okay, let me show you the paperwork. I did not tell my mother what I was planning. I did not tell Paige. I gave them 3 weeks of normal. I answered texts. I called on Sunday evenings the way I always did. I listened to my mother talk about Paige's upcoming semester. I acted like everything was the same because I needed it to be the same until the paperwork was complete. The lease renewal notice came on a Tuesday. I had already submitted my removal request the previous Friday. The landlord processed it within 48 hours. Paige's rental history was clean, and with a new cosigner, she would need to find one, or an increased security deposit she could continue the lease on her own. The landlord sent both of us the updated documentation. The tuition loan letter went to the loan servicer on a Wednesday morning. I had drafted it carefully in language that made clear this was a financial restructuring decision, not an emergency. The servicer confirmed receipt and indicated that Paige would be contacted within 5 to 7 business days with options for refinancing. I set my phone face down on my desk and went back to work. Paige called me on a Thursday. It was 7:15 in the morning, which meant she had seen the lease document and either stayed up all night or had her phone on her immediately when she woke up. What did you do? Not a question. The way she said it, flat, almost confused, like someone who has received information that doesn't compute. I restructured my financial obligations, I said. I had rehearsed this. I'm removing my name from your lease at renewal, and I've notified the loan servicer that I'm requesting to be released as cosigner. You'll need to refinance in your name or find another cosigner. Silence. I've already confirmed with your landlord that you can continue the lease with an increased deposit or a new cosigner. I continued. Your rental history is good, so you have options. I can send you a list of refinancing lenders if that's helpful. Are you serious right now? Her voice had shifted into something I recognized. The climb before the cry. After everything Mom and I have done for you, what have you done for me, Paige? Another silence. Longer. I've supported your education for 2 years, I said. I co-signed your apartment. I've been making loan payments that were supposed to be yours. I never asked for a thank you, but I needed, at minimum, to not have you walk into a client dinner and tell my clients that I think I'm better than you. I came there to celebrate you. Her voice was thick now. You came there because you felt left out. And when you feel left out, you don't have a conversation. You create a scene. I've watched you do it my whole life. And this time it was in front of people whose respect I spent a year earning. She was crying properly now. And I felt something I didn't expect, which was almost nothing. Not cruelty, not satisfaction, just a kind of tired clarity, like when you finally understand the rules of a game you've been losing for years. You can't just do this, she said. I already did, I said. I gave you plenty of notice on both. You have options. I hope you use them, my mother called 40 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to the voicemail, which was 4 minutes of my mother explaining in various ways that what I had done was selfish, that family doesn't abandon family, that she had always known I had this coldness in me, that Paige was devastated, that I needed to call her back immediately and fix this. I saved the voicemail. I don't know why exactly. Documentation instinct, maybe. The accountant in me. I called my mother back that evening. I'm not reversing the decision, I said when she answered. You're going to let your sister lose her apartment. She's not losing her apartment. I explained the options. She has 6 weeks before renewal, which is enough time to arrange a new co-signer. You could co-sign if you choose to. Quiet. My mother had not co-signed originally because her credit was not strong enough. She knew that I knew that. And the loan, she started. She can refinance. Her credit is better now than it was 2 years ago. It may be easier than she thinks. You're punishing her? I had thought about this. I had turned it over carefully because I believe in being honest with myself, and I wanted to know, was I punishing her? Was this revenge dressed up as a financial decision? I'm not punishing her, I said. I'm stopping. There's a difference. Punishment is something you do to someone. Stopping is something you do for yourself. My mother didn't say anything. I love Paige, I said, and I meant it genuinely in the complicated way you can love someone who has caused you harm without meaning to. But I've been carrying her since I was 15 years old. I'm not doing it anymore. It's been 5 months since that Thursday morning. Paige found a new co-signer for her apartment, a family friend, someone my mother knows from church who apparently had no idea what the full picture looked like. The lease renewed. She's still in her apartment. The loan refinanced. It took her 2 months, and she called me once during that period in a state of genuine panic about the interest rate, and I stayed on the phone with her for 40 minutes and walked her through every option because I'm still an accountant, and I know how to read a loan document. She found a credit union that gave her a reasonable rate. The loan is in her name now. I got the director title. My name is on the door, which sounds more dramatic than it is. It's a nameplate outside an office. But every time I walk past it in the morning, I feel something I don't have a good word for. Not pride exactly. More like confirmation. Like the world is acknowledging something it should have acknowledged a long time ago. My mother is still cool with me. Not cold. She calls. We talk. We get through it. She doesn't bring up Paige's finances anymore, which I think is its own kind of acknowledgement. She knows, on some level, that she put too much on me. I don't think she'll ever say it directly. I've stopped waiting for her to. Paige texted me last month. It said, simply, I've been thinking. I'm sorry about the dinner. That was wrong of me. 12 words. 4 years of waiting for 12 words. I sat with my phone for a while, feeling the weight of them. I wrote back, thank you. That means a lot. I meant that too. We're not close, Paige and I. Not the way sisters on television are close, finishing each other's sentences and calling each other every day. But we talk, carefully the way you navigate new terrain when you know there are soft spots in the ground. She asked me last week how the new role was going. I told her it was good. She said, I'm proud of you. And she sounded like she meant it, or at least like she was trying to. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what we get to have. I think about the 15-year-old version of me sometimes, the one in the 2 small sneakers handing over her paycheck. If I could tell her one thing, it would be this. The people who love you don't always know how to show it without taking from you first. That's not an excuse, but it might be an explanation. And at some point, you get to stop letting the explanation be the reason you keep paying. I signed the papers. My name came off the documents. And I walked out of that and into my own life, and the door closed behind me, and I kept going. I've thought about cause and effect a lot since all of this happened. Not in a dramatic way. Just the quiet, practical way you think about things when you've spent years working with numbers and you understand that every input produces an output, and pretending otherwise doesn't change the math. What happened with Paige didn't start the night she walked into Alterman's. It started decades earlier, in a kitchen at a table, with my mother counting out a paycheck that belonged to a 15-year-old girl and deciding it was better spent on someone else. That was the first input. Everything after was just the equation running its course. Here's what I've come to understand about moral intelligence, and I don't mean following rules or being a good person in the abstract sense people talk about at dinner parties. I mean the actual working knowledge of what you owe people and what you don't. I spent most of my life operating without it. I thought obligation meant yes. I thought love meant absorbing cost. I thought being the capable one meant being the one who gave until there was a reason to stop. And I kept waiting for a reason clear enough that no one could argue with it. Paige walking into my client dinner was clear enough. But here's the thing I didn't expect. Acting on it required something I had to build over 30 years. It required the discipline to show up every day at a job that asked everything of me, and to do it anyway, not because someone was watching, but because I had decided that my work mattered, that I mattered. You don't get to make hard decisions cleanly unless you've already done the slow work of deciding what you believe. I had done that work. In every early morning, every paycheck I earned honestly, every problem I solved without credit. That work was what let me walk my sister out of the restaurant without raising my voice. That work was what let me call Robert the next morning and speak in plain sentences about restructuring financial obligations. Strength that shows up only in a crisis is just adrenaline. The kind I'm talking about is built quietly, over years, and you don't know you have it until you need it. What I want to say to anyone watching this who recognizes something in my story, who has a Paige, or who has a mother who always explained instead of apologized, is this: the fact that someone loves you imperfectly does not mean you are required to fund the difference. You can love someone and still stop. You can understand exactly why they became who they are and still decide that you're not going to keep paying for it. Understanding is not the same as accepting. Compassion is not the same as sacrifice. Paige texted me she was sorry. 12 words. And they were enough. Not because they fixed anything, but because they were real. That's the other side of cause and effect. When you stop absorbing consequences for someone, sometimes they finally feel them. And sometimes, when they feel them, something shifts. I don't know what kind of sisters we'll be going forward. I know we'll be more honest ones. And I know that I walked into my office on a Tuesday morning, saw my name on that door, and understood, in a way that went all the way down, that it was mine. I had earned it. Nobody had handed it to me, and nobody could take it away. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the revenge, not the paperwork, not the phone calls. Just that Tuesday morning, that nameplate, that feeling of something being exactly what it should be. I worked for that. And I chose to stop working for things I was never supposed to carry. Those are two sides of the same decision, and I'd make them both again.